Hello, I'm just doing a little bit of a narration on what is kind of the home stretch of coloring my ES345 restoration project. What you see here is the surface that has been directly dyed with Color Fast cherry red stain, and that was a mixture of stain with dye in alcohol, which is then rubbed directly into the wood. Now what that does is give it this sort of grainy texture you see here and that you see on vintage instruments, which is that the dye soaks a little deeper into the pores and end grain and stays a bit lighter on the flat part of the surface. And if you can look at it overall, as I hold it still for a bit, you start to see that there's sort of contour lines of the wooden pattern, right? You're going to see light marks. Any light streaks you see are the actual pattern that you would see in plain maple, right? And that is part of the look. There you can see those light lines running along the length, right? That's pretty much what I want to get. Because if I hadn't dyed the surface directly, and if I had put all of the color in the lacquer alone and sprayed a uniform red lacquer across the whole surface, then what you would get is a more uniform red that doesn't really highlight these streaks that I'm talking about, right? Of course, it's hard to see, you know, it's hard to show you, but I hope the camera will get it there. So you have a little more contour. Right, so the truth is though that that's not really dark enough, right? I don't just want to put ridiculously dark stain on it, but what I know is that on all vintage instruments you would see red lacquer in here. Not here, because I guess that Gibson would put, you see, like this in here is bits of sponge foam to not let any color get on the inside of the guitar. Here too, you would never see any color inside the bridge pickup cavity, but you would see it here in the neck pickup. So what that means is that Gibson, besides dyeing the surface directly, they also sprayed a clear red over the entire guitar, blocking off those areas, right? So that's what I'm going to do now, and that even goes to the binding. You see on the cream binding, I have red on it. I scraped away a little bit on this patch here. And that's what they would do, is do all the coloring, and then at the very end they would scrape away the color that covers the binding, and then they would start the clear coating process, right? So I've left this. I haven't put any masking on it. I'm going to scrape it off with razor blades, and that's the same thing Gibson did. They always razor bladed off the color of the binding, right? So what I'm going to do now, I've mixed a little bit of a red, same exact dye, but in a mixture of lacquer and acetone, and I'm going to spray that onto here, and that is going to lessen the contrast between the light and dark spots here, give it a bit of a deeper red look, and again, that's part of the historical accuracy of the finish. I do expect these dyes to fade a little bit. They always fade compared to sort of the first day that I painted. After a few months or even like a year later, you can see it looking a lot lighter. I don't really want this guitar to get any lighter than this color here, so that's why I also am confident that adding the this color coat now will sort of make the finish hold up in color intensity over the years, right? So I'm going to do that now, and that is my update on this project for now. Thank you very much. Here's the result after doing a red lacquer coat over the straight dyed surface. So this is just following up to my last video where I showed you the surface that had only been dyed directly with cherry dye, right? So now I've added another red coat over it, and the only evidence you could see is that this little light patch here was raw cream binding just now. So this amount of red is what this red lacquer layer contributed. And the reason I did that, as I said before, is to have two different sources of color, which does give a deeper look to the finish. And also too, I was a little worried about resisting fading, so I wanted to have dye in the wood grain itself and then in the lacquer itself, right, to resist UV dye. Also it gives a nice deep look. It doesn't really look any darker red than it did before, which seems to me to mean that I have pretty much saturated the red intensity that's available from this dye. If I wanted to get darker red than this, I'd have to start adding blue or brown to the mix, which I'm not doing. So this is as red as it's going to get, practically. And you could see the red on the neck as well, which is a much different tone because it's over mahogany instead of maple. So that's it. After this is just straight clear coats. Well, I'm gonna have to scrape the binding, then do the clear coats, right? There's a little bit of blushing from the mixture of thinners and so on that I used in relation to the atmospheric humidity. And I'm going to deal with that now by spraying another little heavy reducer coat. So, well, this looks good. I'm pretty happy with this. If the guitar stayed this color for its lifetime, I would be happy about it. Alright, so that's it for now. Thanks.